You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christie Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello, hello. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. Today, you get to meet Jude Charles. Jude is a storyteller, filmmaker, and brand strategist working with purpose-driven entrepreneurs. Jude is an expert in his field, but guess what? Just like the rest of us, he's just a regular guy, too. Why I say that will make sense in just a minute. So normally, Jude is the one pulling back the curtain and taking a deep dive into his clients' stories. If you haven't seen it yet, go check out the link in the show notes to the absolutely out of this world 3-part docu-series that Jude did with my mom for her business and podcast, A Well-Designed Business. It is incredible. Jude has such a natural talent for drawing stories out of people. I got to experience this firsthand as I am in it. I hope you watch it. It's absolutely beautiful. But today we are turning those tables, and Jude is sharing his personal story of burnout with us. And you're not going to want to miss it because it's so relatable. As we know, my whole mission is mental health awareness. And the thing with this story is that I don't think that we often realize how much our mental health is directly impacted by our physical health and our emotional health and our social health and our financial health. Like, it's all connected. Jude weaves this all together with his powerful storytelling, as you'll hear in a minute. And just as a reminder, if you've been listening to these last couple of shows, this is just a sneak peek of what Jude has to offer. And guess what? He's coming to LuAnn Live November 5th through 8th in Orlando. And he's one of the expert panelists that I'll be moderating and talking to about health and wealth in our businesses and lives. And I also have to say, Jude is the first standalone guy on the show. Oh my goodness. I'm just realizing this as I'm recording the intro. I had Marcus Noggle on with his wife, Stacy. But Jude, you are the first dude on the show to stand alone. And I just love that. That is like the perfect person for this. I have a great connection with Jude and we have a great conversation. And so anyway, back to LuAnn Live. You don't have to be an interior designer to benefit from this amazing conference. Creative entrepreneurs, service providers, whoever you are welcome and encouraged, and I know you'll get a lot out of it. And plus, you'll get to meet me and Jude in person. Woo! All right, for now, let me just let you get to know him. All right, here's Jude. Hey, Jude. So nice to see you. Look at us in this context talking. How are you?
I am good. It's good to see you too, Christy. To have this opportunity to be on Sass Says. Obviously, I've known of Sass Says for a while, but glad to be a guest.
Yeah,
Hi.
I just find it like nice to see you outside of a meeting Zoom
Yeah.
where we're just like encouraging my mom to breathe and take a sip of water every 10 minutes. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Those are fun. Those are fun.
Yeah. We've also had a little bit of the reverse situation. You've interviewed me on camera, not too much, not as in depth as I'm probably going to hit you with today,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's fun to turn the tables on you,
Turn
Jude.
the tables. Yeah. It's interesting because I'm an introvert and I have done quite a few of these podcasts, but it doesn't get any easier as an introvert to not know where the conversation's going, But I trust you because, like you said, we've kind of been in each other's atmosphere for a while, so I trust it.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because the first note that I have here is that I was prepping for this earlier this morning, and I was just kind of refreshing myself with your website and your messaging and things, and right at the top it says, "Turn skeptics into raving fans by pulling back the curtain on your business." And the note that I had was, how is it for you as someone who makes a living out of being behind the scenes? How is it to pull back the curtain on yourself? Like, how does it feel? And why do you now make the effort to do it?
I made a conscious decision in 2019. I got invited to speak at a marketing conference for copywriters. And I had been to this conference the year previously. So 2018, I went to the conference. It was probably only like 50 people in the room. So very small, intimate. And then I got invited to speak 2019. And I was like, okay, cool. It's going to be about the same thing, calm, intimate. And then I walk in for rehearsal and they have 200 seats set up.
Ooh.
And there's bright lights, there's a stage. None of those things were there before, the year before. And I started to freak out. And I was
Mhm.
just like, I don't think I want to do this. Like, I was literally, after the rehearsal, I went back to my room, pacing back and forth. And I kept thinking, how do I tell these people that I'm not
Mm.
ready to do this? Well, what I ended up doing to prepare myself, I didn't back out. What I ended up doing was like, I recorded my speech on my iPhone. And then I allowed it to play in a loop at night as I slept with headphones in my ear so that I could remember the speech to try
Interesting.
to calm me down.
Mhm.
I did the speech the next day. And this was like my first time speaking in front of a big crowd.
Right.
And I was very surprised at how much people loved it, came to speak to me at the end. And so, like, when you asked me, like, how easy was it? It wasn't easy at all.
Mhm.
But I realized how much people were impacted by what I had to say. Like, one of the things I did for that speech specifically is I started by sharing a video of me skydiving. I went skydiving for my 30th birthday. I got surprised with skydiving tickets. It wasn't planned.
Whoa.
And when you see the video of me actually jumping out the airplane, I look scared out of my mind. Well, I opened up with vulnerability, and it was that vulnerability that allowed them to also feel like, oh my gosh, he's real. I can talk to him, down to earth. They were moved by the speech.
Mm.
So it wasn't easy, but I think there were things that I did that made it easier beforehand so that I wouldn't completely freak out on
Mhm.
stage and all these other things. But it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy pulling back the curtain, but I think it's been the most important thing I've done in my life. I
Wow.
know, I'm sure in this conversation, one of the things we'll talk about is burnout.
Mhm.
And I've been very vocal and open about burnout. And I think I wouldn't have been had I not begun speaking about other things before burnout actually happened. So
Say that again?
I would not have begun to speak about my burnout had I not been vulnerable with other things that had happened in my life
Got it.
before. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. Yes. 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 Wow. I can't imagine being surprised with skydiving. It's like, oh my gosh, I would kill whoever did that to me. But
It was
also
my
what a
girl.
moment to like come out of
Yeah.
your comfort zone.
Yeah. It was my girlfriend at the time. And I had been talking about skydiving for years. I had wanted to go
Okay.
skydiving, but there was a reason why I'd been talking about it. It hadn't actually happened.
Yeah.
And so literally all I got was wear something comfortable and we're going to be outside. That's all I got.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so when I'm pulling up to the hangar like where the plane is, and I'm like, wait, why are we here? Why?
Hmm.
And it clicked like we're going skydiving.
Hmm.
I was just like, yeah, I wasn't prepared for it, but I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
Actually really loved it.
Yeah.
I want to do more of it. I haven't since, but I want to do more of it. I really, really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I said something that I know was resonated with you, just a moment to come out of your comfort zone. I feel like with what you do, that is often what you're helping someone do. Like you did it for yourself in like, whoa, there's a stage and 200 people. I'm skydiving. These are two examples for yourself. And I'm sure this is a lot of what you do behind the scenes, creating these incredible docu-series and video content for people. Like for some, at times myself included, putting myself out there on camera feels like someone just surprised me with skydiving tickets. Like, what do we do? Like, what are some of the ways that you help people kind of come out from their comfort zone and really have a presence in front of the camera?
Oftentimes, what I try to do is just have a conversation with someone before they ever know the camera's rolling.
Mm,
Um, let's take, for instance, although she's not someone that's not comfortable on camera, but let's take, for instance, your mom. I created a docu-series for LuAnn, and there are like questions I asked your mom that got her to think about her answer in a way that she's not thinking about, oh, I'm on camera and I need to answer this a specific way. So this is like
mm,
one of the questions I asked was, um, I think it was one of the ones where she had been doing so much. It was like a 10-day stretch.
yeah.
She had traveled from High Point to Fort Lauderdale and really wasn't taking a break. And I'm just like, how do you do it? Why are you like going nonstop?
Right.
And what was surprising is she said she realized on that trip that she's no longer in a position where she can go nonstop. Like she does need to
Mm,
take breaks, right?
mhm,
So that's one thing is I try to get them to talk about things that is just like this isn't an interview. This is just two friends talking. That's one way to prepare. Another way is truly just being vulnerable. One of the greatest tactics that I've learned in wanting to get someone else to be vulnerable is you start the vulnerability first,
mm,
right? And you open up about something, and it doesn't have to be like crazy. It could be something fun like skydiving.
right.
Um, but those are like two different ways that I try to get people comfortable on camera. You turn the tables and you make it less about them and just more about you're learning, you're discovering what is it that could help someone else. And when you do that, when you see it in that picture of like, I can help someone else by sharing this,
Mm,
then it doesn't become this, oh, wait, I'm naked in a
right.
sense, right? Like, no, being this open can actually help someone else understand a different perspective about how to do something.
Yeah. It's to me, it feels like kind of focusing on the bigger picture rather than focusing on, the details that no one else is noticing about how your shirt is sitting and the roll hanging over your jeans and is my, crooked nose looking more crooked than usual. It's like no one's paying attention to that. They're trying to connect with what you're saying and leaning into the impact of what you're saying rather than like how you look doing it or like I feel like that is what trips a lot of people up is the self-consciousness behind putting your face, your body, yourself, like that feel that like nakedness feeling out there. Like it's a hard
Yeah,
hurdle to get over.
I think we're our biggest critics and we pay attention to the things that some other people don't even notice,
Yeah,
right? Like
totally.
I might think if I look back at a video of myself, I might think, oh my gosh, my glasses weren't sitting right on my face. But then the person listening to me didn't even notice the color of my glasses. Like
Right.
they were just paying
Right.
attention to
Right.
what I had to share. And the most important thing about that is if you share stories, if you share what is going on in real life, which a story is about a very specific moment in time. Like I started by sharing the story of me speaking on stage in 2019.
Mhm.
Like you're focused on that. You're not focused on what does he look like or what does he even sound like. You're focused on, oh wait, where is this story going, what is he talking about, right? And
Right.
yeah, if you focus on stories and you focus on how can this story help someone else, what is the lesson from this story that can help someone else
Yeah.
better understand, like what can I do differently.
Yeah. If we take that sentiment and apply it to more short form content where you aren't necessarily talking to an interviewer or someone else, like you're standing there with a tripod, make that connection. Like, how do we take this idea of like being vulnerable and make it short form? Because a lot of times I find that vulnerability takes time, right? So how do we make it short form? And I'm curious if you find it easier or harder to do it when you're just standing with a phone or a screen rather than like looking at another human being.
No, yeah, I think it's harder for sure when you're just standing looking at your phone. For me, it has been um, because there isn't. I find it much easier to have this conversation with you because I can see you.
Yeah.
But if I had to decide like, oh wait, I have this great idea and this content I want to share, and I'm just gonna sit in front of the camera and talk. Well, it's a different energy level at that point.
Yeah.
And I have to figure out, how do I start this conversation? How do I share it with the same enthusiasm? How do I not prep too much? Because I know some people will look at scripts and try to write out a whole script. And it's like, for me, it's been much harder, which is why I love to do podcasts. I have done at this point almost 150 podcasts.
Whoa.
And I love them because I go back and listen to the podcasts I've been on. And sometimes I surprise myself at the things that I say on the
Don't you
podcast.
love that? That's happened to me too. I'm like, wow, I sounded amazing. Like I am so smart.
Right. And
Kind of like
so,
take your own advice, right?
yeah. And so I find it easier to just have a conversation versus sitting in front of the camera. Now, but if your way of creating content is sitting in front of the camera, and it's not just because I do this work, but what I'm always recommending is tell a story. Drop me in the middle of a story.
Mm.
For example, I went to the grocery store in 2021. And this is like at the height of my burnout. I'm going to the grocery store. As soon as I get out the car, I look to my left. No, I get out the car and I'm walking to the front door, but I hear a great sound to my left. I hear a loud boom. And when I look to my left, what it is a Tesla car sitting on top of another car. Right. No lie, it was the craziest thing I ever saw. I ran over and there were two guys already standing there, just kind of looking. They were flabbergasted, not understanding what had happened. And I'm like, hey, did anyone call 911?
Right.
And they didn't respond to me. And I asked again, did anyone call 911? Well, no one had called 911. I ended up calling 911 and helped guide the fire department to where this accident had happened in the parking lot. But what I didn't know before I called 911 is that this car that this white Tesla was sitting on, there were three people trapped in that car.
Oh my God.
And luckily, they all came out without being harmed.
Wow.
But it was me stepping into action, being calm under pressure, that helped save these people's lives.
Right.
That story is important to me because I was at the height of burnout and I honestly felt worthless at this point in my life. I felt like because of burnout, I had been told I can't work the way I had been working for the last 14 years. I needed to slow down. But I have found my value and my identity in my work. Right. And so here in this moment, I'm in essence getting a God wink that no, you're so much more than your work. There's so much more to you. Right. I wouldn't have learned that without that moment. Now, that's a short story that I have shared on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I share it with the lesson in mind that you are so much more than your work. And you have to find those moments that share why you're so much more than your work and why, even though I felt worthless, it wasn't true. There was another side to that story. And so I find it easier in that way, that if I'm sharing a story, that it's easier to be able to sit in front of a camera and talk about it because, again, it's something that happened in my life. It's something that I'm just walking you through the journey of what happened. And it's not me just trying to share a tactic with you or trying to be trying to do a pattern interrupt. It's more of like, no, here's a story, here's something that happened. Maybe this is something that can change the way you view yourself too.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that because I think something that I struggle with is, like I'll like think of something and I'm like, does anyone care about this? Like this happened and it's kind of funny to me or it's kind of interesting to me. It had a point to me, and I'll even sometimes go as far as to like pick the phone up and then I'm like, whatever, no one cares, And I think that even if the story isn't as impactful as the one you just told, if you are intentional about knowing why it is you're sharing it and not just perhaps like word vomiting. And I think there's a time and place for that too, right? Like that can be fun, but if you're it's intentionality. It's like knowing why you're posting it. I could see that helping me not only get through the story and actually doing it, but mentally going, yes, someone's going to care about this.
Yeah.
Kind of pushing through that imposter syndrome of like, who the heck cares about what I'm talking about and what I think about. That's part of it too. Is like, who do I think I am to tell this story, or to share this part of my life? But if there's that meaning behind it, I could see that really helping you actually just take the next step.
Yeah. I have been on 150 podcasts. I already mentioned that. And I still go through that imposter syndrome of, wait, should I share this story? Or do people even care about this?
Hmm.
One thing that's helped me get over that hurdle is the responses I always get back. I remember the first time I shared about burnout. I shared the story on stage. And again, scared of sharing it because I'm like, I don't even know how to really talk about this.
Right.
And what happened at the end of me talking was a woman came up to me and she said, "Thank you for sharing your story. I've been going through something for a long time and never really understood it until you talked about what your symptoms were for burnout."
Mm.
And to me, that was like, wait, I could help someone realize that they were going, like, you feel it, you have this awareness, but don't know what it is.
Right.
And here's someone else that's saying they have the same symptoms. And it's like, to me, it felt so much more important to share because of that. And just hoping that, okay, if there's one person I can help with
Right.
either the Tesla story or being afraid to speak on stage or
Hmm.
even being afraid to put yourself on camera because you're just like, you don't think you're good enough or look good enough. That's what matters to me more. That's what helps me decide to show up and continue to show up in the way that I show up, is because there's just one more person I can help.
Yeah.
And I think about how can I help them? So that, and like you said, it's the intention. If I can share this story, maybe it can help one person. That's all I think about. I never think about the thousands or hundreds or whatever. It's just, even if, and that I know there are people that listen to this podcast, but even if it was just, hey, Christie, here's this, and that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's all that really matters to me, at least. And I try to get other people to see it in that same way. Um, I remember I interviewed a client once, or we were doing her interview, and there was something that was really hard for her to talk about, and it was about losing a child.
Mm.
She was 42, I believe, first time trying to have a child, and she lost the child. And she wasn't sure if she could talk about it. But I positioned it in the way that there are other women who have lost children. And then maybe they weren't in their 40s, but there are other women who have lost children who don't know how to talk about it, who don't know how to recover from it. Because one thing that she did that was beautiful, I thought, was even though she had actually lost two children,
Mm.
her and her husband decided that they would build a nursery. They hadn't done it before. They were waiting on the children to arrive to build the nursery, but they hadn't done it before. But this time they were like, we're going to build this nursery all out, like buy the clothes, buy the Pampers, buy everything in hope of,
Mm.
like, they had complete faith this was going to happen. And I was like, do you know how many people are struggling and they have given up on the idea of having a child?
Right.
And here you are saying, no, we believe it so much, we're going to completely deck out this room in order to prepare for that child.
Hmm.
Um, and so she ended up sharing. And she ended up getting so many people emailing her like, oh my gosh, thank you for sharing. Thank you for your showing your faith.
Yeah.
Again, to me, that's much more important than, wait, should I do this?
Yeah.
Is someone going to care about what I have to say? I don't know. I think I've seen it over and over. And that's what I try to remind my clients of, is like, no, people care. People want to know there's someone else, that they're not alone. There's someone else who's been through what they've been through.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. You've mentioned it a few times now, and we obviously we're gonna talk about it. What I mean, I don't know how loaded of a question it is, but what happened? Like when you burned out, like how did you know you were burned out? Was there an event that sort of tipped you over? Like what happened?
I woke up October 10th that morning of 2020, and I could not physically move my body.
Mm.
My eyes opened, but my teeth were clenched. My heart was racing. And no matter what I did for 2 hours, I could not move. Well, after the 2 hours, I ended up calling my therapist because I had a feeling that this was more mental than physical. And that's how I was officially diagnosed with burnout, depression, and anxiety. Now, I knew to call my therapist because I had been seeing a therapist in July of 2020. I had proposed to my girlfriend July 4th. August of 2020, I called off the proposal and broke up with her.
Wow.
So I knew there was like these things happening on top of, yes, it was the year of the pandemic. And
Yeah.
I continued to work throughout the pandemic. There was not a day off for me.
Right.
I was like one of 5 people still on an airplane flying to my clients to like film with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew it was mental. I called him, and that's when I officially got diagnosed. But what it was that I was doing too many things. We ended up finding out that there were 14 different stressors
Oh.
at one time. Most people, for context, most people can only handle 3 or 4 different stressors.
Mm-hmm.
And although he had diagnosed me, or at least told me, hey, I think you might be going through burnout, like he probably diagnosed it, I would say July or August, he about diagnosed. I didn't want to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because of that, again, that's why I knew by the time October came, I was like, wait, maybe he's right. And now my body's physically reacting to this.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's saying, hey, we can't take another day.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's kind of what happened. It was that one day I woke up and just could not move. No matter what I did, I could not move. And I knew, okay, I got to stop ignoring this and change how I'm, what my behavior is and what I'm doing in my life.
Did having the diagnosis and the labeling, did that help you? I feel like there's very strong camps. One camp that really is not for the label, not for the diagnosis, and another that is. Where do you sit with it?
I think the label was important. I think so. For context, my mother had suffered from depression, and I had watched her suffer through depression for 10 years. I think at that point, so I forget what year her depression started, but at that, I think it was 2007, actually, her depression started. So I'd seen that develop over the years. And the label was important because it gave me a solution. Like there was a game plan.
Yeah.
Now, in honesty, I didn't want the game plan. The game plan included medication, and I didn't want it. I didn't want to be on medication. That was part of the reason why I just didn't want to believe the diagnosis that he was giving me.
Yeah.
But if I'm honest, like it helped with my recovery. Like I can sit here in 2023 as we're recording this and say I'm not in burnout, depression, or anxiety.
Right.
But it gave me the solution, but it also gave me tools on how to operate in a different way. I think the biggest thing I learned is that I had started this business when I was 17 years old, video production business. And I had prided myself on the way that I worked. But what worked in my 20s no longer works in my 30s. I'm 34 years old as we're recording this. And it's been 17 years since I've been doing it, but I didn't change the way that I worked. And I think that was the most important thing that I needed to learn. It's amazing what you've been able to do the last couple of years, but now you need to change the way you work. You can't work in the same way. You're just not the same person you were 10 years ago. And I needed to learn that. I didn't want to learn that in order to change.
What was it about the medication that turned you off so much?
I had seen what my mother was on medication, and I had seen what she went through. It dulled her in a way. I'm a creative, and I love my mind, and I value my mind in the way that I create things. Like that's where I found my value in my work. And it was just like, wait, am I gonna dull myself to not be able to work and not be able to come up with creative ideas? Because I saw that's what happened with her. Now she was in I didn't know this at the time, like I didn't understand the different levels of depression. She was in a much worse type of depression than I had been. Because if there were days where she didn't eat and didn't take a shower and didn't want to see outside, but I wasn't necessarily going through that. And I just because of what I saw, I put the picture as, wait, if I take this medication, this is what I'm going to look like, or this is how I'm going to act based on the medication. And I didn't want that.
Meanwhile, though, I'm sure you came to a conclusion similar to about what I'm going to say is the alternative is not being able to get out of bed for other reasons, right?
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to be able to get up in order to do the work.
Right. And that's when I realized, wait, I gotta actually solve this problem and not ignore it or not think. And truthfully, it's not like I didn't even try the other options, which were the natural options of like just maybe working out a little bit more or actually
Right.
getting outside in the morning the first day. Like I hadn't been doing anything. I was just trying to ignore it and continue to work and continue to think that no, they're not right. Like I'm right. I know myself and I can continue past this. Because the more I thought about it and having gone through this journey, I was probably burnt out. Not I was probably. I knew I'd been burnt out since 2018.
Mm-hmm.
But even before that, I know there was probably other moments of burnout that I just ignored and was like, nope, I'm gonna push through this. I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And it was ultimately the 2018 to 2020. Like I'm pretty confident I was burnt out for 2 years before I ever officially got diagnosed. Um, that yeah, just my body gave out, and the alternative is that. The alternative is not being able to move, not being able to function.
Right.
Um, and possibly taking it out on other people too, like your loved ones or your children. And so yeah, it wasn't the right thing. I do not recommend it to people to ignore what you're feeling. Um, and even to be, because it was an ignorant move that just because my mom had suffered from depression and um, was on medication, that somehow it would be the same thing for me. Like I didn't do enough research. I
Yeah.
just was stubborn about it and like, no, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah. Well, and you know, we don't culturally talk about it enough for you to have known any better or to have had any other experience with it. Because I'm sure you've, since talking about it, have learned a lot of the same things I've learned, that there's so many more people struggling than you realize. And so if the people around you aren't talking about it and media is not talking about it, now that's changing. But your mom was your only experience to look at. You hear someone that physically gets sick. How many of us can point to multiple examples of cancer and diabetes and all the things that people suffer, and we can look at how different everybody's individual experience is.
Yeah.
But we don't have the same for mental health yet. We're getting there where people are more open, but we don't have any point of reference, and we're not taught it. It's not something that they tell us in school, which is like so silly to me now.
Yeah. I and that is why one of the reasons I've made the conscious decision to be adamant and vocal about burnout. Specifically burnout and not depression, anxiety, but specifically burnout because I think creatives go through burnout much more frequently
Yeah.
and no one is talking about it. And so therefore we suffer in silence.
Yeah. Yeah.
I forget what year it was, but I watched like Chad Boswick. I might mess up his name, but the actor in Black Panther was he had recently passed away, and he was going through cancer, but filmed like 3 or 4 movies while going through cancer, and no one knew he was going through cancer.
Right.
And there were like a succession of like 3 different people. There was the guy who was the famous fashion designer, also a Black guy who had passed away through an illness that no one knew he had.
Hmm.
And I was just like, why? Why are we doing that? Now, it's everybody's choice whether you share what you're going through or not. It's everyone's choice. But these are figures that were in high positions that it was just like, and if you want to continue to work, continue to work. But like, how do we do that as creatives? How do we do that? How do we continue to show up for our work without having to suffer in silence, without having it be our identity that we're sick?
Right.
And that's why I have chosen to be very vocal, because I did take time off. I took, I think, 3 months off from working in order to take care of myself. But that didn't mean that the depression, the burnout went away automatically or right away.
Right.
Like I believe it took about 2 years for me to fully be out of those things.
Right.
But I continued to work. I continued to show up for other people and be there for my friends and family. And I wanted to be that example. And so that's why I choose to be vocal about it. Like, it doesn't mean your world stops. It doesn't mean that you are less than. Like I said, in 2021, I felt worthless.
Right.
But there were these moments that showed me over and over, wait, who you are is so much more. And this just becomes another challenge that you overcome. And so that's why I've chosen to be vocal about it. But yeah, we don't have the blueprint. We don't have other people that are consistently talking about this is how you do it. Now, you're one of those people, obviously. Yes, you talk about mental health and you talk about, especially from a creative perspective, but I just wanted to be another voice added to it that is like, this is possible. It's not the end of the world if you end up being burnt out. It's not the end of the world if you need to take a break. It's necessary. We live in a society that has 4 seasons, but for some reason we don't believe in taking time off. The 4 seasons being that a tree, the leaves will die, but then it'll grow back the next season. Um, that tree is taking a moment to rest, to recuperate, to rejuvenate. And we should do that as well as human beings in order to be better, to grow like a tree grows, to be more stable. And so that's why I agree. We don't have examples. I didn't have examples. Even when my mother was going through it, it's not like something we talked about. We just kind of knew it was happening.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just wanted to change that narrative. I want to change that narrative and give creatives the permission to be vulnerable and realize it's okay. I'm going through something, but it's okay.
Yeah. My brain is firing in 3 different directions. So I'm going to share them with you, and you're going to jump on whichever one speaks to you the most. The first, I guess, is more of just a comment that I intended to say earlier when you were talking about medication. And you were saying, I didn't try a lot of the natural things. I didn't, like, I found it to be that I needed the medication so that I could try the natural things. Like, that had to come first because I wasn't functioning well without it. And I wasn't like, I was talking about this yesterday with someone. Like, it feels like your brain is occupied by someone or something else. And so the kind of like normal, I guess, when I say normal, I mean up until that point, what I had known my thinking to be like, it was like not that. So if normally in years prior, I would have thought, hey, I'm feeling kind of down. Let me go for a walk. Let me, call a friend. Let me have dinner with my husband. There was a shift that went, none of those things are motivating me. I don't care about any of those things. And so the medication wasn't like this happy pill. It was like this allowed me to get out of my own way to then go, okay, I don't know that I feel like it, but I will go for a walk. Like I
Mm-hmm.
remember saying to my therapist at one point, I was like, this was during quarantine. I was like, I realize that I've not been outside and taking the kids for a walk, taking myself for a walk, done anything outdoors in about 2 weeks. And she's like, why? I'm like, because the thought of like putting a sports bra on and changing out of pajamas is just like too much. And what I noticed, and shortly after that was when I started medication, was that I didn't really feel any more like putting a sports bra on and getting changed and doing all the things, but I was able to do it.
Yeah.
Like I was able
Yeah.
to like talk myself through it. Um, so that was the first thing. The second thing is I was thinking as you were talking about creators and creative people, I still think that there is this belief culturally, societally, that if you are in a creative business, if you are a digital creator and you have platforms where you're in front of people and this and that, that you are somehow so lucky to be doing this fun creative thing that you must love so much that it negates the work part. Like, I don't know. I think we're still having a hard time seeing creatives as like real people with jobs and responsibilities and hardships within those responsibilities. Like it's not all like fun and games. And so the idea that we would be burnt out from like having all this fun creating things all the time is like preposterous, and like that it's just like we need to move away from this. Like it's 2023. The amount of people that are creating things digitally, whether it's like this fun creative unicorns and rainbows or it's a docu-series or like whatever it is, like it doesn't take away from like the real stuff going on. And the last thing, I'm like just giving you a lot right now, um, is I've interviewed quite a few therapists, Black women, who specifically became therapists because in their upbringing, the the idea of the strong Black woman was so strong. Like, you cannot show any weakness at all. You cannot ask for help. Like, you have to always just present as this strong woman. Like, it was enough that it guided their career choice because they were like, there were no therapists available. There were no Black therapists available. I, similar to you, watched my mom go through stuff that we just never talked about. Like, curious if that hits for you with your mom, and that is something that you think about. I think there's still a lot of stigma in the Black culture about therapy. I know therapists who are just like they're literal practice name is like therapy for Black women, because they're just like,
Yeah.
come do. Like, there's still a lot of stigma.
Yeah, in the Black community in general, I think there is stigma around getting help.
Yeah.
Um, I remember when I started therapy, when I started taking medication, even telling my siblings of like what I was going through, and it just seemed taboo,
Yeah.
right? But I knew like I couldn't continue the way that I was going. So yeah, there's because I saw this idea of not talking about what you're going through from both of my parents.
Mm,
Now, my mom was depression. My dad had been diagnosed with prostate cancer.
mm.
And I remember uh, specifically watching him. My dad would do this ridiculous thing where he would wear these white rain boots when he cuts the grass. And this is very vivid in my mind because as he was going through chemotherapy and radiation for cancer, he still wore the same white rain boots to cut the grass. And I remember cutting the grass once, and it took me 3 hours to cut the grass. And I was just like, I don't know how this man does this while he's fighting cancer and weak. Now, he did it before. He used to do it 3 hours nonstop. He did it when he was going through his treatment. He did it by taking breaks, but it was just like, why?
Right.
Right? Like, why are you suffering in this way? And it could have been a pride thing. It could have been like, no, he wants to feel like he's still able. I get
Yeah.
that. But it was never
Or
something
or
we
maybe like
talked about.
distraction too, right?
Or
Like
distraction.
take his
Right.
mind off of what he's
Yeah.
feeling and thinking.
And I get that. But I also think, but we never talked about this. We
Right.
never like, hey, this is what I'm feeling. And it's okay to feel the pain, to feel like you're probably losing a part of yourself. But I just needed to do this for me. Like, even that simple conversation, I just needed
Right.
to do this for me, is not had. Um, I think as a Black man, you're not given permission to have feelings,
Hmm.
right? And so again, all of these things have led to me like, I want to change that though. And now
Yeah.
I haven't started a practice and I still run my video production company, but as a part of that, I part of my mission, my why is to lead and empower entrepreneurs to have relentless courage.
Mm,
Part of that courage is to be vulnerable, to speak about what you're going through, to know that there's strength in vulnerability. And so I have just chosen that even whether I get paid for it or not, I'm going to
mm.
speak about this
Yeah.
because it's important, especially as creatives, it's important to go through the things you're going through because it is those things, those experiences that allow you to continue to be creative.
Yeah.
They give you a different perspective on what creativity is,
Yeah.
right? Because creativity is constraints.
Mm,
You're giving yourself constraints, and sometimes that constraint can be a beautiful thing.
mm-hmm. It's reminding me of Dr. Lex Brown James. She said that whenever we talk about society and culture, she's like, we are society and culture. And so just to think of yourself, you can either think of yourself just as one person talking about something, or you can think of yourself as society and culture and you're talking about it. And it just reminds me of that. Like, it really does start with the individual person. We don't have systemic change. We don't have global change. We don't have any of that if like the individuals aren't doing their part.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we come together as a community to talk about it, to help each other, like that's what creates our society. Is yeah, we are the people who have these conversations. And I get joy. It's probably going to sound crazy, but I get joy when my friends come to me and are like, wait, I think I might be going through the same thing you went through. Can you help me
Yeah.
talk through this?
Yeah.
Because now I know, like, oh, me sharing that story, it gave him or her permission to come to me and say, let's try to figure this out together.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, we the community create that, right? Like the work you're doing through your podcast creates that. The event we're going to have at LuAnn Live creates that.
Mm-hmm.
It gives permission for people to realize, wait, no, we can solve this together. It's like you said, global warming doesn't get solved without us,
Right.
without us deciding that we're going to do something different.
Right.
Well, mental health, burnout doesn't improve unless we decide we're going to do things differently. We're not going to continue to do things the way that we used to do them, where we didn't talk about it, where we just pushed ourselves to the limit, where your body gives out. No, we're going to do it differently. And that happens through what's happening today, the podcast, but also through just conversations. Like I will continue to find joy in people just saying thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do these road mapping sessions where we go through a strategy session before we ever film, before we ever do a docu-series. And I remember doing recently a road mapping session with this duo, interior design duo. They both were in the company running the firm. And then the one that hired me, okay, I knew her pretty well, but the one that didn't hire me, it was our first time meeting and never really connected with her. But one of the things she said was, thank you for being open about your journey.
Mm.
And what I didn't know, she had gone through my Instagram page and had seen like me sharing stories about like just my own journey of like what I went through with burnout and depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I take joy in that because although they had hired me for a video production, they had hired me to go through a strategy session, they were also given the permission to be creatives like interior designers and know like someone else is going through this. Because she said to me, I wouldn't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone through my own thing. I wouldn't talk about it, but I'm thankful that you are the one that's out there talking about it.
Yeah.
So I find joy in that. I find joy in knowing that I'm living out my purpose.
Yeah. It helps to have someone give you that acknowledgement. I think there are moments where I find my own satisfaction in just sharing. I get something out of it, whether it's like a healing or therapeutic to kind of just say something out loud. But it definitely helps to have someone go, oh, I see you in that. And I see myself in that. And you're right. There are a lot of people that aren't going to talk about it. And sometimes I have a hard time accepting that. I'm like, why not? I am. You should do. And it's like, no, everybody's different, right? Like I have to accept that. But I appreciate hearing that because like I said, I have a hard time sometimes accepting that I'm going to be like telling all my deepest, darkest secrets, and someone could come up to me and say thank you and not share their own. It's hard. It's a little hard. Like you want it back, or at least I do. And like you said, like you take joy out of someone saying like, let's talk through this. It's like, yes, the moment is here.
Yeah, because it's that small moment that changes the conversation they have around it, and it changes how they talk to their children about it too. Like that's the way I kind of see it.
Yeah.
Because my parents didn't talk to me about mental health.
Right.
But I also think you said something that was really smart. Here you go, saying something that surprise yourself on a podcast.
There we go.
Is it's that moment that they say, I see you.
Mm.
And I think we as human beings want to be seen. We
Mm-hmm.
want to know that there's value in us, not in the thing that we do. One of the greatest shifts I made in my journey is being versus doing.
Mm.
I found my value in doing a lot of things over and over, doing. I had to learn how to just be Jude Charles, how to show up and what that looks like.
Yeah.
And I think something that you've helped me realize today is that the joy is definitely in helping other people, but it's also in being seen that, oh, he went through this too, and he's somebody I can Like I heard what he said
Mm-hmm.
and I see him.
Yeah.
And so there's beauty in that too. And it's again, it's society, it's us, it's people. It is just continuing to show up as who you are, not just the thing you do.
Yeah. And the last thing I'm going to ask you is, when you really had to look at the being versus the doing, what did you find? Like, what did you find about being Jude Charles versus what Jude Charles does?
I found out that being Jude Charles, doing video production was only 10% of who I am. I had so much more value that I hadn't realized. Like the Tesla car accident was one thing, but it was just like the atmosphere shifts when I walk into a room.
Mm.
And it's because Jude Charles walked into the room, not because Jude Charles did anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of the things that I will talk about at LuAnn Live is how I continued to work and show up, even though I felt very constrained by
Yeah.
my diagnosis. But for context, that's a very high level project. And I had other clients at the same time. So I'm working on these very high level projects, but still continuing to show up and exceed my own expectations
Mm.
because I leaned into me, the person, not I get to create this story.
The to-do list.
Right. Or a
Yeah.
to-do list. Um, and so that's what I think, like, it's an identity crisis. There's no doubt about it. It's an identity crisis. Like I had to force myself to, who is Jude Charles when I'm not working,
Yeah.
when it doesn't have anything to do with my work. So who am I? I am curious.
Mm.
I am a leader. I'm a person that one of my core values is depth versus width. So I truly take time. Like I find joy in these moments where I just get one-on-one with people
Mm.
to ask them questions, to find out more about them. Like I am a friend. I am a son. I am someone who cares about life in a deep way. And all those things matter more than just the work that I do. Like the work, the reason I said it's 10% is because that work may change, but
Mm.
my mission will always remain the same, which is to lead and empower entrepreneurs to have relentless courage. And so that's who I am.
Love it. Love it. Okay. All right, Jude. Well, we're going to get into a lot more of, like you said, the how's to actually keep showing up in business while going through an identity crisis. Sounds super casual, but
Right.
so relatable beyond words. So thank you so much for sharing today who you are and your mission. And I so enjoy getting to know you better. And I just thank you. I look forward to seeing you again.
I look forward to it too. I'll leave the audience with one thing to do, which is take time off to really ask yourself questions.
Mm.
Who are you? What influences you? Who matters most to you? What do you want to stop doing? Like, what is this thing that you
Yeah.
haven't said out loud that you actually want to stop doing? Um, what is the environment you need to change and shift in order to be the person you actually want to be? I take 2 months off every year, and those are questions that I ask of myself to be able to be a better me. And so, yeah, thank you for this time, and thank you for asking some really great questions that got me to think too. Um, and yeah, I look forward to continuing this. And yes, LuAnn Live, will be talking about it more at LuAnn Live, but even beyond that, I'll be continuing to talk about this, I think, well into another 20, 30 years
Yeah.
as this continues to evolve for me too. So
Yeah.
thank you.
So good. Okay. Let's go back to these questions for a minute. Have you ever thought about them? I'm going to put them in the show notes as journaling prompts because let's be serious, we all need to go back to these from time to time, and I'm going to go through them here. Ask yourself, who are you? What influences you? Who matters most to you? What do you want to stop doing? That's such a good one. And Jude reminds us that this can be something that you haven't even said out loud yet or thought was possible. Get that magic wand out, right? What do you want to stop doing? And what is the environment you need to change and shift in order to be the person you actually want to be? Gosh, they're so good. Okay, they're going to be in the show notes. Especially if you're feeling some burnout, go through these questions. I'm so grateful to Jude for sharing his story here. He has been on a Well-Designed Business podcast several times. I will link those in the show notes for you, sharing more of his expertise and his business. But I absolutely love, as you know, I want to get to know the person and his story. And as we can see from this conversation, just a little bit of vulnerability helps us relate to him so much. And as Jude says, that's where the strength is. The strength is in the vulnerability. We all have those stories, the ones that we keep really close to the chest, and it's natural to want to keep them hidden away, but that is what makes us who we are, and I love Jude's sentiment of showing up as who we are and not what we do. I tend to share a lot of the stories that most people keep close to the chest, but even I have a level of, story that I keep to myself, and that's okay. We're not saying you need to spill your guts and share all the things you're not comfortable sharing, but chances are if something is vulnerable for you, someone else is feeling vulnerable about it too. We've discussed burnout here on the podcast before, just recently with Eileen Hun, and again with Marissa Lonick and Dr. Holly Sawyer. I mean, we've discussed it a ton. I've linked those couple of episodes in the show notes for you to go back and listen to. But I want to just say that burnout can't always be solved by time management and self-care routines. Sometimes it can be really, really challenging, like it was for Jude, impacting every aspect of your health, and you may need to seek professional help. I did. Jude says that knowing the diagnosis and having that label helped him because it gave him solutions. And yes, there are still stigmas around mental health and therapy, but we can overcome them. And this is what me and my show are all about. So come see us in November at LuAnn Live. Jude is going to be there. We're going to be talking about burnout. We're going to be talking about health and wealth. It's 2.5 days, 3 if you go for VIP. And we're going to be learning from a bunch of creative entrepreneurs on running businesses and basically like how to run our lives and not let it run us. So go to LuAnnLive.com to sign up, and I hope to see you there. Thank you, Jude. Thank you for listening. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of LuAnn Niagara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.